September 3rd, 2024. The story begins when Rebecca Martinez, a 31-year-old genealogist from San Francisco, travels to her late great-aunt's Victorian home in Napa Valley to settle the estate. What she discovers in a dusty trunk will challenge everything she thought she knew about her family's carefully documented history and reveal a mystery that has remained hidden for over a century. Rebecca's great-aunt Helen had been the family's unofficial historian, maintaining meticulous records of births, deaths, marriages, and significant events dating back to the 1850s when the Martinez family first arrived in California from Mexico. Helen's house, built in 1889, served as the repository for generations of family documents, photographs, and memorabilia that chronicled the family's journey from immigrant farmers to successful business owners in the Napa Valley wine industry. The Victorian home reflects decades of careful preservation. Each room contains carefully organized collections of family artifacts, vintage clothing stored in cedar chests, handwritten letters filed chronologically in wooden cabinets, and hundreds of photographs arranged in albums with Helen's precise, handwritten captions identifying every person, place, and date. Helen's documentation system was legendary within the family, with relatives regularly consulting her records to verify dates, relationships, and family stories. Rebecca has spent her professional career helping families reconstruct their genealogical histories, often working with incomplete records and fragmented evidence to piece together family stories that have been lost over time. Her expertise in historical research and document analysis has made her particularly skilled at identifying inconsistencies and gaps in family narratives. This background proves invaluable as she begins sorting through Helen's extensive collection. In Meadowine, the house's spacious attic, Rebecca discovers a large trunk that appears to have been undisturbed for many years. Unlike the carefully organized materials throughout the rest of the house, this trunk contains items that seem to have been hastily stored and forgotten. The trunk itself is old, probably dating from the early 1900s, with brass fittings that have tarnished with age and a musty smell that speaks of decades in storage. Among dusty linens and outdated household items, Rebecca finds a collection of photographs that don't appear in any of Helen's organized albums or documentation systems. These photographs range in date from the 1890s through the early 1900s, showing various family gatherings, celebrations, and everyday moments that weren't included in the main family archive. Most are informal snapshots that capture spontaneous moments rather than the formal portraits that dominate Helen's organized collection. The casual nature of these photographs makes them particularly intriguing to Rebecca. While Helen's main collection focuses on formal occasions and carefully posed family portraits, these hidden images show the Martinez family in relaxed, everyday settings. Children playing in the garden, adults gathered around picnic tables, and informal gatherings that reveal the personality and warmth that formal photography often missed. One photograph in particular catches Rebecca's attention. Dated on the back in faded ink as July 4, 1901, it shows what appears to be a large family gathering on the grounds of what Rebecca recognizes as her great-great-grandparents' original farmhouse in Napa Valley. The image captures approximately 15 family members of various ages, from elderly grandparents to young children, arranged in a relaxed group around tables laden with food for what was clearly an Independence Day celebration. The photographs' composition and quality suggest it was taken by a skilled photographer, possibly a professional hired for the occasion, or a family member with considerable photographic experience. The lighting is excellent, the focus is sharp, and every person in the image is clearly visible and well positioned within the frame. What makes this photograph immediately intriguing to Rebecca is its apparent completeness and perfection as a family documentation piece. Yet its absence from Helen's carefully maintained family archive raises questions about why such a significant and well-executed family photograph would have been stored away and seemingly forgotten rather than prominently displayed with other important family memories. September 4, 2024. Rebecca spends the morning examining the 1901 Independence Day photograph more closely, using a magnifying glass and good lighting to study every detail of what appears to be a perfect family gathering. The more she studies the image, the more impressed she becomes with its quality and historical significance. while simultaneously growing puzzled about why such an important family document was hidden away rather than treasured. The photograph shows the Martinez family at what was clearly the height of their prosperity and happiness during the early years of their settlement in California. The setting is the expansive grounds of the original family farmhouse, with the distinctive architecture of the late 1800s clearly visible in the background. Mature oak trees provide shade for the gathering, and the well-maintained grounds speak to the family's success in establishing themselves in their new homeland. The family members are dressed in their finest clothing, appropriate for both the holiday celebration and the warm California summer weather. The men wear light-colored shirts with suspenders and dress pants, while the women are attired in elaborate dresses with intricate lacework and detailed embroidery that reflects both the fashion of the period and the family's Mexican cultural heritage. The children are similarly well dressed, with the boys in knickers and white shirts, and the girls in miniature versions of their mother's elaborate dresses. The composition of the photograph reveals careful planning and attention to detail. The family members are arranged in multiple rows, with the elderly patriarchs and matriarchs seated in chairs at the center, surrounded by the adult children and their spouses, while the youngest generation is positioned both seated on the ground, in front and standing among the adults. This arrangement ensures that every face is visible and that the family hierarchy and relationships are clearly represented. The tables around which the family is gathered are laden with an impressive array of food that speaks to both abundance and cultural tradition. Rebecca can identify traditional Mexican dishes alongside American favorites, reflecting the family's successful integration of their heritage with their new country's customs. The abundance and variety of food suggests this was a significant celebration that required considerable preparation and planning. What strikes Rebecca most about the photograph is the genuine happiness and warmth visible in the faces of the family members. Unlike many formal family portraits from the period, which often show stiff, serious expressions due to long exposure times and formal photography conventions, this image captures natural smiles, relaxed postures, and authentic familial affection. The spontaneous nature of many of the expressions suggests the photographer was skilled at putting subjects at ease and capturing genuine moments. Rebecca uses her professional genealogical skills to identify each person in the photograph, cross-referencing faces with other family photos from Helen's organized collection and consulting the detailed family trees that Helen maintained. This process proves remarkably successful. She can confidently identify nearly every person in the image using Helen's meticulous documentation and her own knowledge of family relationships. The patriarch and matriarch seated at the center are clearly her great-great-great-grandparents, Carlos and Maria Martinez, who would have been in their 70s at the time of this photograph. Surrounding them are their children, including her great-great-grandfather Diego Martinez, along with their spouses and the growing next generation of the American Martinez family. The identification process proceeds smoothly until Rebecca reaches a particularly clear section of the photograph showing a group of children positioned in the front row. Here, among children she can easily identify as her great-great-aunts and uncles, she encounters something that stops her analysis completely. Sitting among the Martinez children, as naturally and comfortably as any family member, is a child who doesn't match any person in Helen's extensive family documentation. The child appears to be approximately 8 or 9 years old, with distinctive features that don't clearly align with the Martinez family's characteristic appearance, yet who is positioned and dressed in a manner that suggests complete acceptance and belonging within the family group. This discovery marks the beginning of Rebecca's realization that the apparently perfect family photograph contains a mystery that has remained hidden for over 123 years. September 5th, 2024. Rebecca becomes increasingly focused on the unidentified child in the 1901 family photograph, spending hours with magnification equipment and comparing the image against every family document in Helen's extensive collection. The child's presence in what appears to be an intimate family gathering becomes more puzzling the deeper she investigates, raising questions about family relationships and history that challenge the carefully documented narrative she has always accepted as complete. The unidentified child sits comfortably among the Martinez children, positioned between two cousins that Rebecca can easily identify from other family photographs and Helen's detailed family trees. The child's placement in the front row, rather than at the edges of the group where non-family members might typically be positioned, suggests inclusion and belonging rather than casual presence. The child's clothing matches the quality and style worn by other family children, indicating this was not a servant's child or casual visitor, but someone considered part of the family for this important occasion. Physical examination of the child's appearance reveals features that are distinctly different from the Martinez family's characteristic traits, yet not inconsistent with the broader ethnic diversity of California during this period. The child appears to be of mixed heritage, with features that could suggest European, Mexican, or Native American ancestry, or some combination thereof. The child's positioning and expression suggest comfort and familiarity with the family members, indicating this was not a first meeting or formal introduction. Rebecca searches through Helen's meticulous family records, including birth certificates, death records, marriage documents, and immigration papers, looking for any mention of a child who might correspond to the person in the photograph. Helen's documentation includes detailed information about every known family member, including children who died in infancy, adopted relatives, and extended family members who lived with the primary family unit at various times. The search through official family records yields no matches for a child of the appropriate age and time frame who isn't already accounted for in other family photographs and documentation. This absence is particularly puzzling given Helen's reputation for comprehensive record-keeping and her inclusion of even distant relatives and family connections in her documentation systems. Rebecca expands her search to include family correspondence from the period, hoping to find references to visitors, adopted children, or extended family arrangements that might explain the child's presence at the family gathering. Helen's collection includes hundreds of letters exchanged between family members during the early 1900s, many of which discuss family news, visitors, and changes in household composition. The letter collection reveals normal family communications about births, deaths, marriages, business matters, and social events, but contains no references to an additional child living with or regularly visiting the family during 1901. The absence of any written mention of such a child is particularly significant given the detailed nature of family correspondence from this period, where even minor family events and temporary living arrangements were typically discussed extensively. Rebecca considers several possible explanations for the child's presence in the photograph while being absent from family records. The child could have been a neighbor's child who happened to be present during the photography session, though this seems unlikely given the intimate family nature of the gathering and the child's prominent positioning. The child might have been a servant's child, though the quality of clothing and central positioning argue against this explanation. Another possibility is that the child was a family member whose presence was later deliberately obscured or forgotten due to circumstances that the family preferred not to document. This could include adoption situations, illegitimate births, or family conflicts that resulted in the child's removal from family records and memory. Rebecca also considers the possibility that the child might have died shortly after this photograph was taken, which could explain the absence from later family documentation while accounting for the child's apparent integration into the family group at the time of the 1901 gathering. However, Helen's records include detailed information about family members who died young, making this explanation seem less likely. The technical quality of the photograph itself raises additional questions. The clarity and detail with which the child is captured suggests this was not an accidental inclusion of someone who happened to be present during the photography session. The photographer clearly intended to include this child as part of the family group, taking care to ensure proper positioning and lighting. As Rebecca continues her investigation, she realizes that identifying this unknown child may require expanding her research beyond Helen's carefully maintained family archive to include broader historical records, community documentation, and possibly the memories of older family members who might possess information that was never formally recorded. September 7, 2024. Rebecca travels to the Napa County Historical Society and local archives, hoping to find community records that might shed light on the unknown child's identity and connection to her family. Her investigation expands beyond the Martinez family documentation to examine school records, census data, and community newspapers from the early 1900s that might contain references to children living with or connected to her family during that period. The Napa County Historical Society maintains extensive records of the area's early settlers, including immigration documents, property records, and community event documentation that provides context for family histories during California's rapid development period. Rebecca meets with Dr. Patricia Chen, the Society's chief archivist, who has spent decades researching the histories of the area's founding families and their interconnections. Dr. Chen immediately recognizes the Martinez name and provides access to comprehensive files documenting the family's arrival and establishment in the Napa Valley. These records confirm much of what Rebecca already knew from Helen's family documentation: the Martinez family's immigration from Mexico in the 1850s, their successful establishment of farming operations, and their gradual integration into the broader community of early California settlers. However, the community records reveal additional details about the Martinez family's living arrangements and household composition that weren't fully documented in Helen's family papers. Census records from 1900 and 1910 show occasional variations in the number of children and household members that suggest the family may have regularly taken in relatives, foster children, or children of friends and neighbors during times of need or transition. The 1900 federal census, taken just 1 year before the mysterious family photograph, lists the Martinez household as including several individuals who aren't identified in Helen's family trees. Among these are 2 children whose relationship to the family head is listed as ward rather than son or daughter, indicating some form of guardianship or foster arrangement that may not have been formally documented in family papers. Rebecca discovers that informal adoption and child-rearing arrangements were extremely common in early California communities, where extended family networks, economic hardships, and high mortality rates often resulted in children being raised by relatives or family friends without formal legal documentation. These arrangements were typically handled through community understanding and verbal agreements rather than official paperwork. Local school records from the Napa Valley area provide another avenue for investigation. The one-room schoolhouse that served the Martinez family's district maintained attendance records that included children from various families and living arrangements. Rebecca finds enrollment records for several Martinez children during the 1900-1902 period, along with notation of other children who attended school while living with local families on temporary or permanent basis. Among the school records, Rebecca discovers an entry for a child identified as Thomas Martinez, who attended classes during the 1901-1902 school year, but doesn't appear in later enrollment records. The timing corresponds exactly with the family photograph, and the use of the Martinez surname suggests the child was living with the family and being treated as a family member for school purposes. However, the school records provide limited additional information about Thomas's background, family relationships, or the circumstances that brought him to live with the Martinez family. The notation system used by the small rural school didn't require detailed documentation of family relationships, focusing instead on basic identification and academic progress. Rebecca searches through local newspaper archives from the period, hoping to find references to family events, community gatherings, or social news that might mention the Martinez family and provide clues about additional children or household members. The local papers from this era regularly reported on family celebrations, visitors, and community social events in considerable detail. The newspaper search yields several articles mentioning Martinez family activities and celebrations, including a brief notice about their 1901 Independence Day gathering that corresponds to the family photograph. The article describes the event as a grand family celebration that brought together multiple generations of the respected Martinez family and their extended connections for a memorable holiday gathering. The phrase "extended connections" intrigues Rebecca, as it suggests the presence of individuals beyond the immediate blood relatives who might have been considered part of the family network for social purposes. This language could account for the presence of the unknown child, while explaining why such connections might not have been documented in formal family records. Dr. Chen suggests that Rebecca examine records from local churches, particularly the Catholic missions that served Mexican immigrant families during this period. Church records often documented informal family arrangements, baptisms, and community relationships that weren't captured in government documents and might provide information about children who were integrated into family networks through religious or community connections. As Rebecca's investigation expands into community records, she begins to understand that the Martinez family existed within a complex network of relationships that extended beyond blood relatives to include community connections, business relationships, and informal family arrangements that provided support and stability during the challenging early years of California settlement. September 9, 2024. Rebecca visits St. Helena Catholic Church, the mission parish that served the Martinez family and other Mexican immigrants in the Napa Valley during the early 1900s. The church's archives contain baptismal records, communion registers, and community documentation that often captured family relationships and living arrangements that weren't recorded in government documents, potentially holding the key to identifying the mysterious child from the 1901 photograph. Father Miguel Rodriguez, the current parish historian, guides Rebecca through the church's extensive archives, which date back to the 1850s when the parish was first established to serve the growing Mexican immigrant community. The church records were maintained in both Spanish and English, providing detailed documentation of births, deaths, marriages, and community events that affected parishioners' lives. The Martinez family appears frequently in the church records, confirming their active participation in parish life and their status as respected members of the Catholic community. Rebecca finds baptismal records for all the known Martinez children, along with documentation of marriages, confirmations, and other sacramental events that marked important milestones in family members' spiritual lives. What proves most significant is the discovery of guardianship arrangements that were blessed by the church, but not necessarily formalized through government channels. Father Rodriguez explains that during this period, the Catholic Church often served as an informal social services system for immigrant communities, helping to arrange care for orphaned children, supporting families during economic difficulties, and facilitating temporary or permanent adoption arrangements within the community. In the baptismal records for 1892, Rebecca discovers an entry for Thomas Miguel Santos, baptized as an infant with notation that he was being raised by the Martinez family as their own son. The baptismal certificate lists his birth parents as Elena Santos, deceased, and father unknown, indicating the child was orphaned as an infant and taken in by the Martinez family through church arrangement. This discovery immediately explains the unknown child's presence in the 1901 family photograph. Thomas Santos would have been 9 years old at the time of the Independence Day gathering, matching the apparent age of the unidentified child. The church records show that he was raised alongside the Martinez children and treated as a full family member for religious purposes. However, Rebecca's excitement at solving the identification mystery is tempered by a disturbing discovery in the church records from 1902. Thomas Miguel Santos appears in the parish death register with notation that he died in February 1902 of influenza, approximately 8 months after the family photograph was taken. The death record includes the poignant detail that he was buried in the Martinez family plot and mourned as a beloved son. Father Rodriguez provides additional context about the high child mortality rates during this period and the devastating impact of epidemic diseases on immigrant communities. The influenza outbreak of 1901-1902 affected many families in the Napa Valley, and the church records document numerous child deaths during this period. The death record helps explain why Thomas disappeared from Helen's family documentation and why the 1901 photograph was stored away rather than prominently displayed with other family memories. The loss of Thomas shortly after this joyful family gathering may have made the photograph too painful for the family to display, leading to its storage in the forgotten trunk where Rebecca discovered it. Rebecca searches for additional information about Elena Santos, Thomas's birth mother, hoping to understand the circumstances that led to his placement with the Martinez family. The church records reveal that Elena Santos had been a young woman who worked as a domestic servant for several local families before her death shortly after Thomas's birth. The notation suggests she had no family support system and that the young Martinez family's willingness to raise her child was considered an act of Christian charity. The church records also reveal that Thomas's integration into the Martinez family was complete and loving. He appears in documentation of family religious events, is listed among the Martinez children in communion and confirmation preparation records, and is referenced in church correspondence as being treated indistinguishably from the biological Martinez children. Father Rodriguez shares that informal adoption arrangements like Thomas's placement were extremely common during this period, when legal adoption procedures were complex and expensive, but community and religious networks provided effective support systems for children who needed families. These arrangements were often not documented in government records, but were well established and recognized within the community. The discovery of Thomas's identity and tragic fate transforms Rebecca's understanding of the family photograph. Rather than capturing a moment of simple family happiness, the image now represents the Martinez family's compassion in welcoming an orphaned child and the brief period of joy and belonging that Thomas experienced before his untimely death. The photograph takes on deeper emotional significance as possibly the only surviving image of Thomas Miguel Santos, preserved by accident when the family found the memory too painful to display prominently. The Martinez family's decision to include Thomas prominently in their Independence Day celebration demonstrates their complete acceptance of him as a family member, regardless of blood relationships. Rebecca realizes that uncovering Thomas's story has revealed not just the identity of an unknown child, but a testament to her family's values of compassion, generosity, and the belief that family bonds extend beyond biological relationships to encompass anyone who needs love and support. September 11, 2024. Rebecca delves deeper into the historical records of the 1901-1902 influenza epidemic that claimed Thomas Miguel Santos's life, seeking to understand the broader context of childhood mortality during this period and how the devastating loss affected the Martinez family's subsequent documentation and memory-keeping practices at the Napa County Health Department's Historical Archives. Rebecca meets with Dr. Sarah Johnson, a public health historian who has extensively researched disease outbreaks in early California immigrant communities. Dr. Johnson provides access to epidemiological records and community health reports that document the severe impact of infectious diseases on families during the early 1900s. The influenza outbreak of 1901 and 1902 was particularly devastating for the Napa Valley region, affecting approximately 30% of the population and causing especially high mortality rates among children and elderly residents. The epidemic began in the fall of 1901 and peaked during the winter months, with February 1902 recording the highest number of deaths in the county's history up to that point. Dr. Johnson explains that immigrant communities were disproportionately affected by the epidemic due to crowded living conditions, limited access to medical care, and the physical demands of agricultural work that prevented proper rest and recovery. Mexican immigrant families, despite their strong community networks and traditional healing practices, lost many children during this period. The county health records show that the Martinez family was severely affected by the epidemic, losing not only Thomas but also two elderly relatives and experiencing serious illness among several other family members. The concentrated impact on a single family explains why the period following the 1901 family photograph was marked by grief and disruption that may have influenced the family's record-keeping and memory preservation practices. Rebecca discovers that families who experienced significant losses during epidemic periods often developed different approaches to preserving memories and family documentation. Some families became more meticulous about recording every detail of their loved ones' lives, while others found certain memories too painful to preserve prominently, leading to the storage or concealment of photographs and documents associated with lost family members. The psychological impact of losing multiple family members in a short period often resulted in what Dr. Johnson describes as protective forgetting, where families consciously or unconsciously minimize discussion and documentation of lost loved ones as a coping mechanism. This pattern helps explain why Thomas's memory may have been preserved in church records and legal documents, but not prominently featured in family photographs and stories passed down through generations. Rebecca examines additional community records from the epidemic period, finding evidence that the Martinez family was deeply involved in community mutual aid efforts during the crisis. Local newspaper accounts describe Carlos Martinez organizing food distribution for affected families and Maria Martinez helping to care for orphaned children whose parents died during the outbreak. The family's community service during the epidemic adds another layer to their decision to raise Thomas Miguel Santos. Rather than being an isolated act of charity, taking in the orphaned child appears to have been consistent with the Martinez family's broader pattern of community support and their belief in collective responsibility for vulnerable community members. School records from the period following the epidemic show significant disruptions in enrollment and attendance as families dealt with illness, death, and economic hardship. The one-room schoolhouse that Thomas had attended was closed for several weeks during the peak of the outbreak, and many children never returned to classes after losing parents or being forced to work to support their families. Rebecca finds a letter written by Diego Martinez, her great-great-grandfather, to relatives in Mexico in March 1902, shortly after Thomas's death. The letter, written in Spanish and preserved in Helen's collection, provides the only direct family account of Thomas's final illness and the family's grief at losing him. Perdimos a nuestro querido Tomás, Diego wrote. Era nuestro hijo en 1900, todo excepto en sangre. Y su muerte nos ha roto el corazón como si fuera nuestro propio hijo. Murió rodeado de amor, llamándonos mamá y papá hasta el final. We lost our dear Thomas. He was our son in everything except blood, and his death has broken our hearts as if he were our own son. He died surrounded by love, calling us mama and papa until the end. This letter confirms Thomas's complete integration into the Martinez family and the profound grief his death caused. The emotional impact described by Diego helps explain why the family may have found the 1901 photograph too painful to display prominently, despite its quality and historical significance. The letter also reveals that Thomas was buried wearing a small silver cross that had belonged to Diego's own father, symbolizing his complete acceptance as a Martinez family member. The cross was inscribed with Tomás Martínez, hijo querido, beloved son, indicating that the family chose to honor him with their surname, despite the lack of formal adoption papers. Rebecca's investigation into the epidemic period transforms her understanding of the family photograph from a simple documentation of a holiday celebration into a precious record of a brief moment of happiness and family completeness before tragedy struck the Martinez household. September 13th, 2024. Rebecca returns to Helen's house with new understanding of Thomas's place in the family, searching for additional evidence of how his death affected the Martinez family's emotional life and their subsequent approach to preserving family memories. Her investigation now focuses on finding personal documents and correspondence that might reveal the family's private grief and the reasons why Thomas's memory was preserved but not prominently celebrated. Armed with Thomas's full name and the knowledge of his 1902 death, Rebecca conducts a more systematic search through Helen's extensive collection of family letters and personal documents. She pays particular attention to correspondence from the period immediately following the influenza epidemic, hoping to find evidence of how the family processed their loss and made decisions about preserving Thomas's memory. In a wooden filing cabinet that she had previously examined only briefly, Rebecca discovers a collection of condolence letters received by the Martinez family following Thomas's death. The letters, written by friends, neighbors, and extended family members, provide intimate glimpses into how Thomas was perceived by the broader community and how deeply his loss affected those who knew him. One letter from a family friend describes, Tomás es un niño especial quien trajo alegría a todos los que lo conocieron. A special child who brought joy to all who knew him, and mentions his talent for music and his ability to make other children laugh during difficult times. The letter suggests that Thomas had a particularly bright personality that made him memorable to community members beyond the immediate Martinez family. Another condolence letter, written by Thomas's schoolteacher, describes him as an exceptionally bright student who showed promise in reading and mathematics despite having started school with limited English skills. The teacher's letter mentions that Thomas often helped translate for other Spanish-speaking children and served as a bridge between the Mexican immigrant students and their English-speaking classmates. These letters paint a picture of Thomas as a child who had not only been loved by the Martinez family, but had also made significant contributions to the community during his brief life. His loss appears to have been mourned not just by his adoptive family, but by teachers, neighbors, and other community members who had been touched by his personality and talents. Rebecca discovers a particularly revealing letter written by Maria Martinez to her sister in Mexico, dated 6 months after Thomas's death. The letter, written in Spanish with Maria's careful handwriting, provides the most detailed account of the family's grief and their struggle to understand why such a beloved child was taken from them. No puedo mirar las fotografías de nuestros días felices sin sentir el corazón roto, Maria wrote. Tomás está en todas nuestras memorias más preciosas, pero verlo tan alegre y lleno de vida en las fotografías hace que su ausencia duela más profundamente. I cannot look at photographs of our happy days without feeling heartbroken. Thomas is in all our most precious memories, but seeing him so joyful and full of life in the photographs makes his absence hurt more deeply. This letter explains why the 1901 family photograph was stored away rather than displayed prominently. The image of Thomas's happiness and integration into the family made his subsequent loss too painful for regular viewing. The letter reveals that the family possessed several photographs that included Thomas, but that they found looking at them emotionally overwhelming in the immediate aftermath of his death. Maria's letter also reveals that the family initially considered destroying photographs that included Thomas, feeling that the pain of seeing him was too great to bear. However, Diego convinced the family that preserving the images would honor Thomas's memory and ensure that future generations would know that he had been an important part of the Martinez family story. Diego dice que algún día nuestros nietos querrán saber sobre todos los niños que amamos. Maria continued, dice que Tomás merece ser recordado como nuestro hijo, no olvidado como si nunca hubiera existido. Diego says that someday our grandchildren will want to know about all the children we loved. He says Thomas deserves to be remembered as our son, not forgotten as if he never existed. This passage reveals the family's internal debate about how to preserve Thomas's memory while managing their grief. Diego's perspective that future generations should know about Thomas suggests a deliberate decision to preserve evidence of his place in the family while protecting the current generation from the pain of constant reminders. Rebecca finds additional evidence that the Martinez family maintained Thomas's memory in private ways that weren't visible in their public family documentation. A small journal kept by Maria Martinez includes annual entries on the anniversary of Thomas's death, recording prayers, memories, and updates about family events that Thomas would have experienced had he lived. The journal entries reveal that the family continued to set a place for Thomas at family gatherings for several years after his death, and that they regularly visited his grave in the family plot. These private rituals demonstrate that Thomas remained an important part of the family's emotional life, even though his memory wasn't prominently featured in their public family narrative. The discovery of these hidden documents and letters transforms Rebecca's understanding of her family's relationship with loss and memory. Rather than simply forgetting Thomas or excluding him from family history, the Martinez family had developed a complex approach to preserving his memory while protecting themselves from the ongoing pain of his absence. September 15, 2024, Rebecca's investigation takes an unexpected turn when she discovers information about the photographer who captured the 1901 family gathering, leading her to a collection of professional photography records that provide additional context about the Martinez family's decision to commemorate that particular moment and their relationship with Thomas Miguel Santos. While researching local business directories from the early 1900s, Rebecca identifies the photographer who likely created the Martinez family portrait. The technical quality and professional composition of the image suggests it was taken by William Morrison, a traveling photographer who specialized in family portraits and operated throughout Northern California between 1895 and 1905. Morrison's business records, donated to the California Historical Society after his death in 1932, include detailed logs of his photography sessions, client information, and notes about special circumstances or requests that affected his work. These records provide unique insights into the families and communities he served during California's early development period. The entry for the Martinez family session, dated July 4, 1901, includes notes that illuminate the family's specific intentions for the photograph and their relationship with Thomas. Morrison's record indicates that the session was commissioned specifically to create a comprehensive family portrait that would include all current family members, including adopted son Thomas Santos. Morrison's notes reveal that Diego Martinez specifically requested that Thomas be positioned prominently in the photograph and that multiple shots be taken to ensure that Thomas appeared clearly and happily in the final image. The photographer noted that the family took particular care to ensure Thomas was comfortable and well-dressed for the session, treating him with the same attention given to the biological Martinez children. The photography records also indicate that the Martinez family paid for additional copies of the photograph to be made, with instructions that copies be sent to relatives in Mexico and to other family members throughout California. Morrison's notes suggest that this photograph was intended to serve as an important family document that would be distributed widely to maintain family connections across geographic distances. Rebecca discovers that Morrison kept detailed technical notes about his photography sessions, including information about lighting conditions, equipment used, and special techniques employed to achieve particular effects. His notes about the Martinez session reveal that he used his highest quality equipment and took special care with the composition because the family had specifically requested a photograph that would serve as a permanent family record. The photographer's records include a follow-up entry from early 1902, noting that Diego Martinez had contacted him to request additional prints of the family photograph following the loss of young Thomas. Morrison noted that Diego specifically wanted extra copies to preserve Thomas's memory and to ensure that relatives who had received earlier copies could maintain them as memorial keepsakes. This information helps explain why multiple copies of the photograph existed and why the particular copy found in Helen's attic might have been stored away while other copies were kept by different family members. The family's distribution of the photograph to various relatives may have created a situation where some copies remained as treasured family heirlooms while others became too painful to display prominently. Morrison's business records also reveal that the Martinez family commissioned him for several other photography sessions during the 1895-1905 period, but that the 1901 Independence Day session was the largest and most elaborate portrait they requested. The timing and scale of this particular session suggests it was planned as a special commemoration, possibly recognizing the family's prosperity and stability during a particularly successful period. The photographer's notes indicate that Thomas participated enthusiastically in the photography session, showing no signs of shyness or discomfort with the formal process. Morrison described him as a bright and engaging child who clearly felt completely at home with the Martinez family, and noted that Thomas's natural expressions and comfortable positioning contributed significantly to the photograph's overall success. Rebecca's research into Morrison's other work during this period reveals that he regularly photographed immigrant families throughout Northern California, often creating formal portraits that served important cultural and personal functions for families establishing themselves in their new homeland. His photographs frequently served as documents sent to relatives in countries of origin, proof of prosperity and successful adaptation to American life. The Martinez family's decision to commission such an elaborate family portrait during the summer of 1901 appears to have been part of a broader pattern among successful immigrant families who used formal photography to document their achievements and maintain connections with extended family networks. The inclusion of Thomas in this important family documentation demonstrates the completeness of his integration into the Martinez family identity. Morrison's records provide the final piece of evidence that Thomas Miguel Santos was not simply a temporary ward or foster child, but a fully integrated family member whose place in the Martinez family was considered permanent and important enough to document in their most formal family portrait. September 17, 2024. Rebecca contacts surviving elderly relatives, hoping to find family members who might possess memories or stories about Thomas Miguel Santos that weren't preserved in Helen's documentation. Her investigation has revealed that Thomas was indeed a beloved family member whose memory was preserved privately but not shared with later generations, and she hopes to understand how this protective silence affected the family's collective memory. Rebecca reaches out to her great-uncle Roberto Martinez, now 91 years old, and living in a retirement community in Sacramento. Roberto is the youngest son of Diego Martinez and would have been born in 1933, 31 years after Thomas's death, but he represents the generation closest to the family members who actually knew Thomas personally. During their phone conversation, Roberto immediately recognizes Thomas's name when Rebecca mentions her discovery. "Ah, Tomas," he says with evident emotion in his voice. "I wondered when someone would finally ask about him. My father talked about him sometimes when I was young, but always with such sadness that we learned not to bring up his name." Roberto explains that Thomas's memory was indeed preserved within the family, but in a very private way that wasn't shared with outsiders, or even discussed openly among family members. Diego Martinez had continued to speak about Thomas throughout his life, but only during quiet family moments and never in the context of formal family history discussions. "My father would say that Thomas was the brightest of all his children, and that losing him taught him that love doesn't require blood," Roberto recalls. "He used to tell me that Thomas had a gift for making people laugh and for helping others feel welcome. But these conversations always made him cry, so we learned not to ask questions." Roberto reveals that the family had maintained a tradition of visiting Thomas's grave every year on the anniversary of his death, but that this tradition gradually faded as the original family members aged and died. The younger generations were never told about the significance of these visits or about Thomas's place in the family history. This information helps Rebecca understand how Thomas's memory survived privately within the family while being omitted from the formal family documentation that Helen maintained. The emotional difficulty of discussing Thomas's life and death created a pattern of protective silence that eventually resulted in his story being lost to subsequent generations. Rebecca learns that Roberto possesses several items that belonged to Thomas, including a wooden toy horse that had been carved by Diego Martinez specifically for Thomas's 8th birthday, just months before his death. Roberto had kept these items without fully understanding their significance, preserving them as family heirlooms that his father had insisted were important but never fully explained. During a visit to Sacramento, Rebecca meets with Roberto and examines the items he has preserved. The wooden horse shows evidence of considerable use and care, with smooth surfaces that suggest it was a beloved toy. The craftsmanship reflects Diego Martinez's skill as a carpenter and his love for the child who would receive it. Roberto also possesses a small photograph that Rebecca hasn't seen before, an informal snapshot of Thomas playing with other Martinez children in the family's garden. Taken sometime during 1901, the photograph shows Thomas laughing and completely integrated into the group of children, providing additional evidence of his happy placement within the family. Most significantly, Roberto has preserved a letter written by Thomas himself, apparently as a school exercise in English writing. The letter, addressed to Mama Maria and Papa Diego, expresses Thomas's gratitude for his place in the family and his happiness with his life in California. The childish handwriting and simple English demonstrate both his youth and his effort to master his new language. "Dear Mama Maria and Papa Diego," the letter reads, "Thank you for making me your son. I am happy to live with you and my brothers and sisters. I will try to be a good son always. I love you very much. Your son Thomas." This letter provides the most direct evidence of Thomas's own feelings about his placement with the Martinez family, and confirms that he fully understood and embraced his role as their son. The letter's preservation suggests that it held special meaning for Diego and Maria Martinez, serving as a tangible reminder of Thomas's love and gratitude. Roberto explains that his father had shared this letter with him when Roberto was struggling with adolescent questions about family identity and belonging. Diego used Thomas's story to teach Roberto that family bonds are created through love and commitment, rather than just biological relationships, but always within the context of the sadness about Thomas's early death. The discovery of these preserved items and Roberto's memories helps Rebecca understand that Thomas's exclusion from Helen's formal family documentation wasn't due to shame or rejection, but rather because his memory was too emotionally charged for the family to discuss openly. The protective silence that developed around his story was meant to honor his memory while shielding the family from ongoing grief. Rebecca realizes that her investigation has not just solved the mystery of the unknown child in the photograph, but has also recovered an important family story that had been preserved privately but lost to public family memory. Thomas Miguel Santos emerges as a beloved family member whose brief life had a lasting impact on the Martinez family's understanding of love, loss, and the meaning of family relationships. September 20th, 2024. Rebecca returns to her great-aunt Helen's house with a complete understanding of Thomas Miguel Santos's place in the Martinez family history and a determination to restore his memory to its rightful place in the family's collective narrative. Her investigation has revealed not just the identity of the unknown child in the 1901 photograph, but also a profound story about family love, loss, and the complex ways that grief can both preserve and conceal memory. The dining room table in Helen's Victorian home is now covered with evidence from Rebecca's investigation: the original 1901 family photograph, church baptismal and death records, letters revealing the family's grief, the photographer's business records, and the precious items preserved by Roberto Martinez. Together, these materials tell the complete story of Thomas's 9 years of life and his lasting impact on the Martinez family. Rebecca carefully examines the family photograph one final time, now seeing Thomas not as a mysterious, unknown child, but as Thomas Miguel Santos, beloved adopted son who brought joy and laughter to the Martinez family during his brief life. His prominent position in the photograph, surrounded by siblings and cousins who clearly accepted him completely, represents not just a moment of family happiness, but a testament to the Martinez family's capacity for love and inclusion. The investigation has revealed that Thomas's story represents far more than just a case of informal adoption during California's early settlement period. His integration into the Martinez family demonstrates the values and character that define the family's approach to community responsibility and their understanding that family bonds are created through love and commitment rather than biological relationships alone. Rebecca decides to create a comprehensive family history document that restores Thomas to his proper place in the Martinez family narrative. Working with the evidence she has gathered, she prepares a detailed account of Thomas's life, his placement with the family, his happy integration into their household, and the profound grief his death caused among family members who loved him as their own son. The document includes copies of all relevant records: the church baptismal certificate identifying him as an orphaned infant raised by the Martinez family, the school enrollment records showing his academic progress, the photographer's notes about his comfortable participation in the family portrait session, and the death certificate confirming his burial in the Martinez family plot with full recognition as a beloved son. Most importantly, Rebecca includes transcriptions and translations of the personal letters and documents that reveal the family's private grief and their deliberate decision to preserve Thomas's memory while protecting themselves from the ongoing pain of his loss. These materials demonstrate that Thomas was never forgotten or rejected, but rather remembered with such intensity that discussing his story became too emotionally difficult for family members to share openly. Rebecca contacts other Martinez family descendants, sharing Thomas's story and explaining how his memory had been preserved privately, but lost to the family's public narrative. The response from family members is overwhelmingly positive, with many expressing gratitude for learning about this previously unknown family member and appreciation for understanding more about their ancestors' capacity for love and inclusion. Several family members contribute additional pieces to Thomas's story. A cousin in Los Angeles possesses a copy of the 1901 family photograph that had been passed down through her branch of the family, confirming that the image was indeed distributed widely as a family document. Another relative in Mexico has preserved letters from Diego Martinez that mention Thomas's academic achievements and his talent for music. Rebecca arranges for Thomas's grave in the Martinez family plot to be properly marked with a permanent headstone that identifies him as Thomas Miguel Santos Martinez, beloved son, 1892-1902. The headstone inscription, approved by family consensus, acknowledges both his birth name and his place in the Martinez family, ensuring that his memory will be preserved for future generations who visit the family burial site. The 1901 family photograph is professionally restored and framed, with a detailed caption identifying each family member, including Thomas Miguel Santos. Rebecca arranges for copies to be distributed to interested family members, along with the documentation explaining Thomas's story and his significance to the family's history. Rebecca's investigation concludes with a family gathering in Napa Valley, where relatives from across California come together to honor Thomas's memory and to celebrate the recovery of his story. The gathering takes place on July 4, 2024, exactly 123 years after the original family photograph was taken, creating a symbolic connection between past and present family celebrations. During the gathering, family members share the 1901 photograph and discuss the story that Rebecca's investigation has uncovered. Many relatives express amazement that such an important family story had been lost to their collective memory, and gratitude that Rebecca's genealogical skills and persistence had recovered Thomas's place in their family history. The family decides to establish a tradition of remembering Thomas during annual family gatherings, ensuring that future generations will know about the orphaned child who became a beloved Martinez family member and whose brief life taught important lessons about the meaning of family love and inclusion. Rebecca's investigation transforms the mysterious 1901 family photograph from a puzzling image containing an unknown child into a precious family document that captures a moment of complete family happiness and demonstrates the Martinez family's most admirable values. Thomas Miguel Santos, the child no one remembered, has been restored to his rightful place as a beloved family member whose memory deserves to be preserved and celebrated alongside all other Martinez family ancestors. The story concludes with Thomas's memory fully integrated into the family's contemporary narrative, ensuring that his brief but significant life will be remembered by future generations who will understand that family love extends beyond biological relationships to encompass all children who need acceptance, care, and belonging.